I'm not worth much, sir, but I can cook, the homeless woman told the lone mountain man. The wind screamed like a dying creature across the high Montana ridges, dragging sheets of white snow into the valley where the lone mountain man, Elias Crow, hauled firewood toward his isolated cabin. For 12 winters he had lived alone on this mountainside, avoiding the world that had hurt him more than any blizzard ever could. A man who had lost his wife, his boy, and the warm glow of companionship, bearing his heart under layers of cold survival and rugged silence. As he trudged through knee-deep snow, the forest seemed wrong, too quiet, too watchful, and that's when he saw the shape collapse near the tree line. Half covered in drifting snow like nature itself was trying to swallow the fragile body. Elias dropped the firewood and rushed forward, boots crunching fast. A woman lay there, gaunt, trembling, clothes torn and dusted with frost, her hands stiff like brittle sticks. Her hair was plastered to her forehead and her lips were cracked blue. She looked more ghost than human, but when Elias knelt and touched her cheek, her eyelids fluttered weakly open, revealing eyes so tired they barely reflected the sky. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Elias barked, voice gruff but urgent. She made a noise like a whimper, but her lips barely formed the words. I ain't worth much, sir, but I can cook." Her voice broke like it came from a throat that hadn't tasted water in days. Elias frowned, irritation battling concern. Mountain life had taught him to be wary, to trust no stranger in the wilderness. But there was no deception in her, only hunger, exhaustion, and a lifetime of running from pain. He lifted her carefully, feeling how feather-light and cold she was, and carried her toward his cabin, boots slipping on ice while the snow hammered down harder, as if warning him that time was running out. Inside the warm glow of his cabin, lit, with a crackling fire and the smell of pine, he set her on a bed of blankets near the hearth, rubbing her hands to spark warmth back into them. Her breathing was shallow but steadying. When he finally removed the ragged coat from her shoulders, he saw layers of hardship etched into her thin frame, bruises fading on her arms, and a deep exhaustion that spoke of nights spent hiding, traveling, starving, surviving. He poured her a cup of hot elk broth and held it to her lips. She sipped like someone who feared the bowl might vanish if she blinked. "What's your name?" Elias asked, voice softer now. She swallowed, eyes flickering. "Mara," she whispered, "just Mara." He didn't press for more, not yet. Instead, he wrapped another blanket around her and fed the fire, watching her with a cautious, reluctant protectiveness. Mara gazed around the cabin with a mix of fear and wonder, as though she couldn't believe warmth was real. When she noticed Elias watching, she hurried to speak again, voice shaky. "I ain't trying to cause trouble, sir. I only know how to cook. That's all I'm good at," Elias huffed. "You're good at surviving too," he muttered. "Most folks wouldn't have made it through this storm." Mara blinked at that like she had never once considered herself capable of surviving anything. She whispered, "You should have left me out there." Elias glared. "Ma'am, if I wanted you dead, I wouldn't have carried you half a mile in a snowstorm." Her face changed, just a flicker, but it proved she wasn't used to kindness anymore. And just like that, something unspoken shifted between them. Like embers glowing beneath ash, the storm raged all night. But inside the cabin, something fragile, warm, and unexpected was beginning to thaw. By morning, Mara could stand, though her legs trembled like a newborn fawn. Elias woke to the soft clatter of pots and the scent of something he hadn't smelled in years, spices, warmth, familiarity. He rolled out of bed, instinctively grabbing his rifle, but froze in the doorway when he saw her. Mara kneeling beside the iron stove, sleeves rolled, hands steady despite her exhaustion, cooking with the kind of reverence people use for prayer. She had taken simple ingredients, dried beans, salt pork, mountain herbs, and somehow turned them into something that smelled like comfort and memory. She didn't look up until she sensed him there. Then she startled, almost dropping the pan. Sorry, sir. I just thought making breakfast was the least I could do." "I ain't worth much, but—" Elias cut her off gruffly. "Stop saying that." But Mara only ducked her head, used to being spoken over. They sat at the table and Elias took a bite of the stew. Warmth flooded him instantly, not just through his stomach, but deeper, as if something long frozen inside him cracked. He stared at her. "Where'd you learn to cook like that?" Mara hesitated, fingers twisting in her lap. "My mama, before things got bad," that was all she said. Elias sensed wounds behind her silence, wounds that weren't his business. But as the days passed, Mara proved herself constantly. She cooked meals that turned plain food into feasts. She scrubbed the cabin until it shined. She even repaired Elias's torn shirts with small, careful stitches, not because he asked, but because it made her feel useful, alive. Yet she never stopped expecting to be thrown out. Every time Elias left to chop wood, she'd glance toward the door like she feared he wouldn't return. Every time she dropped a spoon or burned a biscuit, she'd flinch like she expected punishment. One night, while Elias sharpened his knife by the fire, Mara finally spoke the truth. Back where I come from, I was nothing. People treated me like nothing, telling me I wasn't good for anything but working their kitchens. Elias stopped sharpening. Is that why you ran? Mara swallowed. I didn't run. I escaped. Her hands shook. Elias set down the blade carefully. Well, he said softly, you're safe here. She stared at him, eyes wide, as though nobody had ever spoken such words to her. And then something even stranger began to happen. Mara laughed. Just a small sound at first, like she was afraid the mountain might punish her for it. But Elias heard that laugh, and it hit him like a shot of whiskey on an empty stomach, burning, warming, waking things inside him he thought were long dead. Days turned into weeks, and Mara changed the cabin without even trying. She hummed while she cooked. She dusted the shelves. She aired out the blankets, leaving them smelling of pine. Elias tried to keep his distance, but he found himself watching her. Her careful hands, her quiet determination, the way she smiled when she thought he wasn't looking. She wasn't just surviving here. She was reclaiming pieces of a life stolen from her. But the mountains always test those who enter them, and trouble can find even the most remote corners of the world. One evening, as Mara ladled stew into bowls, the distant crunch of boots sounded outside. Mara's face drained of color. Elias reached for his rifle. Who is it? He asked sharply. Mara whispered, voice trembling. Men. The men I escaped from. And suddenly the peaceful cabin felt like a trap about to snap shut. I was nothing. People treated me like nothing, telling me I wasn't good for anything but working their kitchens. Elias stopped sharpening. Is that why you ran? Mara swallowed. I didn't run. I escaped. Her hands shook. Elias set down the blade carefully. Well, he said softly, you're safe here. She stared at him, eyes wide, as though nobody had ever spoken such words to her. And then something even stranger began to happen. Mara laughed. Just a small sound at first, like she was afraid the mountain might punish her for it. But Elias heard that laugh, and it hit him like a shot of whiskey on an empty stomach, burning, warming, waking things inside him he thought were long dead. Days turned into weeks, and Mara changed the cabin without even trying. She hummed while she cooked. She dusted the shelves. She aired out the blankets, leaving them smelling of pine. Elias tried to keep his distance, but he found himself watching her. Her careful hands, her quiet determination, the way she smiled when she thought he wasn't looking. She wasn't just surviving here. She was reclaiming pieces of a life stolen from her. But the mountains always test those who enter them, and trouble can find even the most remote corners of the world. One evening, as Mara ladled stew into bowls, the distant crunch of boots sounded outside. Mara's face drained of color. Elias reached for his rifle. Who is it? He asked sharply. Mara whispered, voice trembling. Men. The men I escaped from. And suddenly the peaceful cabin felt like a trap about to snap shut. Mara sank to the floor, shaking violently. Elias knelt in front of her. You listen to me, he said firmly. You don't belong to nobody. Not anymore. For the first time, she broke, tears streaming silently, shoulders shuddering as years of fear cracked open. Elias wrapped a blanket around her and held her head gently. She whispered, broken, they'll come back. They always come back. But Elias's voice was iron. Then let 'em. I ain't letting them take you. That night, while Mara slept fitfully by the fire, Elias prepared for war. He laid traps along the ridge. He checked every bullet. He reinforced the cabin windows with planks. He wasn't just protecting a helpless woman, he was defending something he hadn't had since tragedy ripped his family away, a purpose. And he realized with a shock that Mara had become the warmth in his cold world. She had brought life back to his cabin, and he would bleed before he let anyone take that from him. Dawn broke red, like the mountain itself sensed the blood that might spill. Mara rose early and found Elias outside sharpening a hatchet. She stepped toward him, hesitant. "You shouldn't risk your life over me." Elias stopped, turned slowly, and looked at her with a depth that made her chest tighten. "You saved my life, Mara." She blinked. "What?" "A man can be alive and still dead inside. Been that way for years." He swallowed, voice softening. "Till you filled this cabin with warmth again." Mara's breath hitched. In that moment, the mountains no longer felt so cold. But before she could speak, a sound shattered the morning. Peace, the unmistakable echo of horses, climbing the ridge again. They were coming back, and this time they meant to finish it. The second confrontation was nothing like the first. This time the men came not with questions but with guns drawn, fury burning in their eyes like oil-fed flames. Elias shoved Mara into the cellar trapdoor just as bullets slammed into the wooden walls. Splintering beams and rattling shelves, Mara crouched in darkness below, hands over her mouth. Listening to the chaos above, gunshots, shouts, Elias's heavy boots shifting as he took cover behind the fireplace stone. She wanted to stay hidden, wanted to obey him, but something inside her snapped. A lifetime of being powerless, voiceless, used and discarded. She couldn't endure it anymore. Elias had risked everything for her, and she would not let him die alone. She pushed up the trapdoor an inch and peeked. The men had broken the window and were firing blindly inside. Elias fought like a wolf cornered, calm, precise, terrifying, but he was outnumbered, and every bullet he fired thinned his chances. Mara scanned the cellar shelves. Her eyes landed on the heavy iron skillet she used every morning. She grabbed it, climbed out quietly, and slipped through the smoke-filled cabin like a shadow. One of the intruders climbed inside through the window. Mara saw her chance, heart pounding, breath shallow, and swung the skillet with every ounce of strength her broken past could muster. The crack echoed. The man fell like a cut tree. Elias spun stunned. "Mara! I'm done hiding," she gasped. Rage and courage lit her eyes like fire. Together they fought not as protector and victim, but as two survivors refusing to surrender. Elias fired at the second man, dropping him with a chest shot. The third burst through the door, roaring in fury. He charged at Mara, but Elias tackled him, sending both crashing into the table. The man's gun skidded across the floor. Mara snatched it, hands trembling, not with fear, but with the realization she finally had a choice. The man lunged for her. Mara pulled the trigger.